Welcome to the State of the Nation weekly update, brought to you and to me by our friends at Pace Car Rental. Come on, guys, let's support them. They support the State of the Nation. You can go to their website, rent a car, use the code SONA, S-O-N-A, and get a discount. It's worth the trouble. Thank you to Pace for sponsoring us, and thank you to you for watching this show, and remember to subscribe to the channel. So, imagine if you run a business, right? And you hear that the biggest company in your industry has got all sorts of problems. They've got financial problems. They've got a bad leadership crisis. Their marketing is terrible. Their products are terrible. Customers are sick of using that particular company's products. If you were one of the other companies, one of those competitor companies that really would like to grow your business, wouldn't you do something about it? Wouldn't you say, hey guys, let's get around the table and see how we can take over the business that big company used to have? Well, that's perhaps how you and I think about it, but clearly our political parties don't think like that at all. Right? We have got the ANC at 40% as per the last general election. And everything that has happened since then points to them doing even worse at every successive election. To the point where it looks like they are going to get as close to wiped out at the next election as what is possible, down to the 30% level, maybe even lower. Why? People are just sick and tired of the ANC. They're viewed as a corrupt organization, inefficient. They do not know how to manage our money. They steal our money. Everything about them has been bad. Now we've got these commissions showing how the comrades within the ANC party were divvying up your and my money. But money that we pay for the government to do what governments should do, and they've been incapable of doing that. On top of that, they even kill the elderly by stealing money from the hospitals. Can't run cities. Everything points to a rout of the ANC. They've got no leadership. Even their next leadership cohort are compromised. We know Paul Mashatile at the moment, he's trying to keep as quiet as possible, but there are books written about his dealings. The fact of the matter is you've got a deputy president who's been in politics all of his life that owns 70 million rands worth of houses. Fikile Mbalula has been mentioned at the commissions. Have I painted the picture enough that the ANC is finished? Now imagine you're one of the other political parties. Surely you should be rubbing your hands and you should be saying, great, this is an opportunity for us to get those votes. Well, perhaps we are a little bit hasty in making that conclusion. So let's look at where our political parties sit. Democratic Alliance, our second biggest party, 21%, seem to be absolutely happy with their 21%. They have shown no aptitude, no desire to grow from that 21% mark. They are perceived as a party for white people. So what do they go and do? They get 6 parliamentary positions and fill them with 4 white people and 2 black people, right? In Africa, 7% of the population is white. Surely you should sit around the table and say, guys, let's make our party look a little bit more like what we would need, because ultimately they're a political party and they deal in votes, right? They're not a sports team that deals in other things. This is a political party. You need the support of people. On top of it, the DA has lost the PR game. They have allowed themselves to become known as the party that only looks after rich people, even though that is not true. But try and go and convince anybody that it's different, and they have lost that game. So you've got the party that should be the second biggest party. They should benefit from the fall of the ANC. Instead, they're losing by-elections. They're losing by-elections in the outer reaches of the Western Cape, where they're losing to the Patriotic Alliance. We'll talk about them soon. And they're making no headway in townships. Surely you would sit around a table and say, guys, how are we not taking advantage of our position as the second biggest party, the only party that has a meaningful political footprint by running the Western Cape, but Dololo, to use our famous South African expression. So it's hard to see the DA holding on to their 21%, never mind growing. That's where the DA stands. Mkhonto Wesizwe did unbelievably well in the last general election to get 15% in its first outing. Unbelievable. Now, sometimes those great performances in your first election can be a curse rather than a blessing. We saw Cope stuff it up all those years ago when they got nearly 10% in their first electoral performance, and needless to say, they crumbled from there because you start having battles, power battles. You don't have enough good people to send to Parliament. All sorts of bad things happening. People start saying, well, actually, it was a protest vote. Therefore, I don't really want them running stuff. And they will then just gradually find their margin, their mark, which will probably be somewhere in the low percentages. And Mkhonto Wesizwe is looking exactly like that. Their wonderful tactic was to defer to their 80-something-year-old leader, Jacob Zuma, who then goes and appoints a whole lot of compromised people. All the people responsible for state capture are there, from Brian Molefe, Lucky Montana, Siyabonga Gama, the discredited public protector, which is COM Kobani. They headed up in Parliament by John Slope, the only judge to be impeached. Now, if you were thinking, here's a good vote catcher, a whole lot of young voters would love to see old compromised people in charge. I don't see the political savvy to that kind of tactic. So they're doing it now. They're going to pay the price. They will hold steady for an election or two, but there's no growth there. Of course, their biggest issue is the link to Zuma and the link to the Zulu tag, if you want to call it that. Yes, the Zulu nation is a very big nation and a very sought-after electoral bloc, but there's the rest of the country. And MK has to become appealing to the rest of the country, and I don't see them even making any attempt to do that. That's before we even get to the fact that we have no idea what their policies are. EFF, we saw them decline at the last election, and since then we've seen a purge of leaders. Now we are down to one leader, and it's Julius Malema, and what he says goes. And who doesn't want to watch Julius Malema making a speech? He is probably the best individual speaker in the world, but do you want this guy running your country? Well, 90% of the country says no. And I haven't seen anything in his Marxism, Leninism, Fanonialism, which resonates with South African voters. And I think that the kind of gimmick of wearing overalls, that's sort of like being used up. The country's moved on to more serious things now. We want people in business attire attending to business. So EFF, where their growth comes from, I don't see it. IFP, the original Zulu party, never fails to disappoint. You can't get excited about anybody in the leadership of the IFP. The one way to always kill off the IFP is to give them a little bit of power. They seem to use it pretty badly. Let's see from here, they might get a little bit of fall off from EFF, but hardly to replace the ANC. Patriotic Alliance is the one party that's growing. Why are they growing? Because they have become quite clearly a party for colours. Finished. That's the end of it, right? They've got a charismatic leader in Gayton McKenzie. There was an easy road for him to follow. That is to say, coloured people are looking for a home. We'll provide them with a home. Great. What is he going to do? He's going to race to get half, 3/4 of that colored vote, and then what? The problem is the same one that we mentioned with MK. Sometimes your biggest problem is you've got too many Zulu voters, you start looking like a Zulu party. In the case of PA, they're going to get too many colored votes, they're looking like a party for coloreds only. Right? ActionSA is an interesting one. They're about the only party that's going after the rump of the black middle class. They are the only ones that are looking like the ANC should look. So they could grow. But how much could they grow? What, nearly 2% in the last election? Maybe they double that. I'm talking about what happens if at the next election the ANC loses 20% of their electoral support, plus all those voters that are sitting at home. I do not see one party that is putting their hands up to say, vote for us, we're a centrist party, we want rule of law, we want to make South Africa a better place. Instead, what are voters in South Africa being fed? They're not being fed those centrist values. They're being fed Marxism, Zuluism, revisionism. Remember how good things were during state capture 1.0. A country with a history like ours, let's put the whites back in charge. That's going to work? Probably not. So, why is it that our politicians just refuse to understand that there is this massive opportunity to go out there and to become the party of the people? I view this situation the same as there was a massive opportunity, and we seem to have forgotten some of the problems that beset South African rugby years ago. Here you've got a country that was played historically by white South Africans, but it was starting to be played by other South Africans. The country was going mad. There was quotas. Every Springbok coach ended up in misery over the question of how many black players are you fielding? How does this team become more representative? Rassie Erasmus comes along. He makes the Springboks the team for the whole country. And what happens? The whole country gets behind him. They follow the idea. They see themselves represented on the field. Now, do we even talk about color? No. It's become a non-issue, and it's becoming a sport to challenge football as our most popular sport. Why? Because our rugby gets results. It is time that somebody does a Rassie Erasmus for politics. It can't be more simple. Get out there, understand what it is that people want to see in a political party. They want to see the same thing. They want to see themselves represented. They don't want a party just for their group. Some people do, but you're not going to get the rump of the voters that way. South Africa is a very diverse country. What is so hard about making your party diverse? Now, I know that there'll be people in the DA saying they're very diverse. Well, if they're that diverse, let's have a look at their leaders and see what that looks like in a photograph. Become diverse. Don't just talk about it, do it. What is so difficult? The prize is so big. The prize is so big. And yet nobody wants to just take those few steps over and say, oh, okay, I see what it is that it would take, and do it. Instead, you have every politician in this country campaigning on what's wrong with the other party. Not what we're doing well, what's wrong with the other party. That old thing of, well, you want to vote for that party, then you must enjoy your misery. Oh, that doesn't help, right? Rather become a party that I want to be part of. And it just surprises me that we are watching in real time. The commissions are showing to us the ANC imploding in real time. Okay? And yet, I do this every day. You guys are watching this because you have an interest. Tell me in the comments below where the bulk of their voters are going to go to. And before we start blaming voters for, that old thing, why are these voters so stupid? They keep on voting for the same people. Start putting yourself into the shoes of those voters and start saying, I know that I'm I know that I'm finished with the ANC. And here I've got a choice of parties, and all of them have given me reasons not to vote for them. And which party is giving me a reason to vote for them? And I promise you, you will scratch your head until your hair starts looking like mine. Because I only look like this, because I keep on scratching my head as to why these politicians don't see it. They don't see that the one big advantage that the ANC has always had was that, for a whole lot of historic reasons, we could go into that at great length. The point is they became known as the party for everybody. Why are they declining? Because they started to become the party just for a select few. They started to get rid of all of their white members, Indian members, colored members. They now got a very, very small minority of that. It's largely a black party. They have always been ideologically ambiguous. Then they start to pass laws like expropriation, Bella, etc. And it's an absolute insult to their voters to say, Bella, we know you don't want to help your children run their education, so therefore we'll have Bella that makes it impossible for anybody to run their children's education. Expropriation Act. We know that whites used to own all the land, therefore we won't let anybody own land, as if that's a vote catcher. It's not a vote catcher. So, I don't understand how these politicians, and I speak to them regularly, and I get dull eyes looking back at me, saying, don't you understand that this was the only party that at one point made a mass appeal across lines, and your party doesn't do that? And I just don't see the answer. So, what is going to happen? Well, local government elections, we're going to go through with the same structure. We're going to get the same parties saying, look how well we run that province, we can run it at your province, and it will have some appeal. You will get people voting on these grouping lines. So you'll get MK doing quite well in rural KZN. You know, PA will do quite well in rural Western Cape. ANC will hold on to the Eastern Cape. Who knows if anybody's still alive in the Free State. That kind of sort of response, it will resemble the last election. But I'm looking at 2029 and I'm wondering, with this current crop of parties that refuse to appeal to the bulk of voters, surely the time has come for somebody to grab that by the horns and say, you know what, we'll become the party for everybody. We will become that party that appeals to you regardless of what you are. We're going to be a centrist party. We want South Africa's economy to grow. We want you to become wealthy. We're not going to talk about the poorest of the poor. We want you to be rich. Surely that's a party that people would get behind and vote for. Well, I can promise you, if one of these parties don't do it soon, somebody's going to do it. That's all that I have to say on this. So, you leave me with no option but to tell you to subscribe to the State of the Nation. Consider what I've said. Leave your comments below and let's have a discussion. Thank you so much for joining me today.